Or we can use the diminished, and that introduces what we call chromatic motion in the bass line. If you notice, a diminished triad is nothing but an A7 without the bass, without the A in the bass. What's up, everyone? This is Yusuf. Today I'm going to talk to you about secondary dominance. It's a topic in music theory that can really expand your songwriting and open up a lot of worlds creatively. So let's dive right into it. We're going to be talking about what is a secondary dominant chord, how do we use it, why would we use it, and in part two, in a separate video, I'm going to show you some examples of some famous songs, everything from rap and hip-hop to the Beatles and everything in between that uses secondary dominance. So let's just jump right in. So what is a secondary dominant? We have in music diatonic theory. So I had another video, I'll throw to that right here, where I explained about that a bit. So I won't go over that in as much detail. But basically, in any key, we can harmonize the naturally occurring scale, right? We can harmonize each tone in that scale. Right? And then that has the same order every time. That's kind of like our standard palette when we're writing songs. Now, what secondary dominants allow us to do, there's other techniques that let you do this, but this is the start of chromatic harmony as opposed to diatonic, meaning within the key. We're talking about chromatic harmony, borrowing chords from outside the key. And there's other ways to borrow, but we're only going to stick to this one right now because it shows up so often. I'll just take you through all the examples. So basically, before we can talk about what a secondary dominant is, we have to talk about there's two types of chords that can function as secondary dominants. Either a dominant 7 chord, well, I should say 3. A major chord, a dominant 7 chord, or a diminished chord. I'll just spell them out in C. So a major chord, C, E, G, the first, the third, and the fifth of the scale. You can build any major chord like that. The dominant chord, we add the 7th. So instead of taking the natural 7th, we flat the 7th. Now that's a dominant 7th. And the diminished chord, if we build C diminished, instead of building it on C major, we'll build it on C minor and we'll flat the 5th. Very tense, kind of not used. That diminished is not used as much in pop music and standard music that you hear on the radio, although it's really beautiful when used, and I'll show you some examples of it later. So those are the 3 chord types that can be a secondary dominant. Now, let's just go through the different types and you'll start to understand what I mean. In C major, the dominant, C is considered the tonic. So that's home base. And we have different names for different chords, 4. And 5 would be considered the dominant. So in most of Western music, it's a play between tonic, dominant, tonic, dominant. And how do we get from the tonic to the dominant? And how do we get from the dominant back to the tonic? So that's a lot of what it is. Secondary dominant means we're going to a second key center. So we're going outside of C, and the first example I'll use will be we'll play A major. Might sound something like that to a D minor. Okay, so what did we do? We're playing 1 in C. This is our 1. You might hear that in a lot of 50 songs. 1 6 4 1 6 4 5. That's a very common chord progression in a lot of music. So you notice the 6th chord is minor in C, naturally occurring. A minor. Well, I played an A major before, so I sharped the C. So instead of playing A, C, E there, I raised the C to go out of the key of C, and then I resolved it to D minor. Now, how does that work? It works with something we call why does it resolve? It's something called a leading tone. So in the key of C, that half step leads you. That B leads you back to C. And if you notice, we're talking about tonic dominant. Okay, C is a tonic. G has the B in it right there. And that B is a tension. It leads us back in because, as you know, that there's 2 half steps in the major scale that occur. The 3 to 4 and 7 to 1, or 7 to 8, and the 7 to 8 movement suggests the key center. So with a secondary dominant, what we're doing is we're picking a chromatic out of the key of C note to lead us to a different key center. So let's go back. Let's keep it with A. So we took C, now we took A, and if you notice, C sharp is not in C. C major does not contain that note, that black note. So that's why it's outside of the key. That's the diminished chord. That's the A7, okay? And so that's our new leading tone, and it resolves up to the D minor, which is the naturally occurring 2. So we call that 1, and then we call A the 5 of 2, okay, 5/2, because we're suggest the A major suggests that we're in a key of D. And then from here you could go to D major, but let's just keep it simple, and we'll go to the naturally occurring D minor, the 2 chord. So that's a movement that you see a lot. And so that's with the major chord. Now we can add the 7, C to A7. It just adds more tension by adding that tritone dissonance, we call it. And it makes the resolution even sweeter, okay? Or we can use the diminished. And that introduces what we call chromatic motion in the bass line. See, the C to C sharp to D is a chromatic movement in the bass line, which is pretty nice, and a nice move there. If you notice, a diminished triad is nothing but an A7 without the bass, without the A in the bass. So they're very similar, okay? In A7 or A major, the tension is on the 3rd of the chord, the C sharp. But when we use a diminished chord, it's much easier to see the tension because it's chromatic. So even though these aren't used as often, they're easier to see. Okay, so enough on the 5 of 2. I think we got the 5 of 2. Let's look at all. Now we can do this on all the other ones. So let's just go through them. What's the next one? 5 of 3. Okay, so we just work backwards. What's a 3 in C? There's 1, 3. This is why circle of fifths is so important to memorize, because it's the 5 of. So if you know your circle of fifths very well, this will be really easy to go through. The 5 of E would be a B chord. Okay, so if we play C to a B major, it resolves to E minor, and you hear the resolution. Da, 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 da. Okay, so again, it's the same thing. We can use a B7, or a D sharp diminished. Right, the same thing that we saw before. It's that tension. It's the D sharp creates a new leading tone that leads us into E. Okay. Okay, it's not nice and chromatic like before in the bass line, but it still creates a resolution. So there's with B, 5 of 3 to 3, and then there's 5/7 of 3 to 3 minor 7. You know, you can dress these up however you want. And finally, let's do it again. There's the full diminished. That's much more tense. You're explicating that chromatic, that leading tone movement. Okay, let's just go through the other ones. 5 of 4 is an interesting case because there is no 5 of 4, because the 5 of 4 would just be C itself. But we can do 5/7 of 4. And there's a famous example in Desperado that I'll show you in the next video by the Eagles. Okay, and so the same idea, the same principle applies here. We would have a 5/7 that leads to an F, and the leading tone is E. Again, it's the 3 of the chord. The 3 of that C7 chord leads us to the 4 chord, which is F. So, and you can hear how we sound like we're kind of going out of the key. Okay, in that case, we're taking the B flat, but the leading tone is still in the key. So I don't know what to say about that. It's a weird example, but it's still a secondary dominant 5/7 of 4, and then the diminished triad on that would be an E diminished. So if we're in C, we're going along in C, and we play E diminished chord. That's a 7 diminished of 4. Because in the key of F, 7 is diminished. So it's a leading chord into that F. Let's do 5 of 5, which is very, very common. It's basically a 2 major chord. And you can think of these all the same way. Like when we played C to A, you can think of that as a major 6 chord. When we played C to, what was it, B, that's a major 7 chord instead of diminished. Usually in C, 7 would be diminished. Right? But if we play it as a 7 major chord, 5 of 5, we can think of it as a major 2 chord. And then it resolves to the 5. So it's the 5 of the 5. I know it can get a little confusing, but I have a little chart and I'll throw it up. I probably already did. So it's the same idea though. The F sharp is the tension, it's the out of key. And then F sharp resolved down to, or up to G. And we can have the same way. We can have it with a major triad, C, D major, 5 of 5 to 5, G, C, D7, 5, 7 of 5 to 5. Or we can have the diminished. 1, 7 diminished of 5, F sharp diminished to 5. Okay? And these don't always have to resolve, although frequently they do. You can create a tension and then not go to the resolution, and that's a compositional trick. And in the example section I'll show you how people play with tension resolution to make a song and its chord progression more interesting. So I could go to the 7 diminished of 5 and go to 4, and that's kind of jarring. It's unexpected, so it tricks your ear. So let's continue on and finish the examples of the basic secondary dominant. So we have C, and then we can play a major 3 chord or a 5 of 6, which you see that a lot, and resolves to 6. So that suggests E minor. And these all kind of suggest the related mode a bit. You know, when I play a 5 of 5, I get that raised 4th. So it's kind of suggesting C Lydian a bit. So it's a bit happier of a tension. If we're using E 5 of 6, it suggests Aeolian mode or the minor mode, and so it's a more somber tension. But it's the same principle. We're going to C. When we play that E, this is the third of that chord is the chromatic note, and it's the leading tone that leads us from G sharp back into A minor. And whether we play it with a 7, a 5 7 of 6, or whether we play as the full 7 diminished 7 of 6. I mean, 7 diminished of 6. Some of the terminology can get you a little tongue-tied, but you'll start to recognize the sound. You'll start to, if you play these more on guitar or whatever, piano or whatever instrument you play, your ear will start to recognize these. Oh, that's a 5 of 5. I hear it. Oh, that's a 5 of 6. Oh, that's a 5 of 3. Sexy Sadie. Okay, and we'll go into that. So we had the 5 of 6. That's that G sharp diminished to A minor. That's really nice. Okay, so I've just played to you every secondary dominant chord that's possible in the key of C. And now you can do that for every key. So if I'm in G and I play the 5 of 6, it's B, right? If I'm in G and I play the 5 of 5, it's going to be A, right? A is the 5 of D. That's why the circle of fifths is so important, because secondary dominants. And you'll notice this in so many popular songs. It really, it might sound boring and it might sound tedious, like, you know, math. It's kind of like math, actually. But memorize this like you memorize your scales, and your whole world will open up in terms of composition and songwriting. So in the next video, I'm going to go through some popular examples from Radiohead and the Eagles, the Beatles, and CeeLo Green. And I'm going to show you how all these different types of music are connected through the theory of secondary dominant chords, and how we use tension and resolution to play with the ear a bit. My name's Yusuf. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel if you like this kind of content. I really appreciate it. Let me know in the comments what other kind of topics you would like to hear, and what are some songs where you've seen secondary dominant chords that are interesting to you. Do you use them in your own songwriting? Let me know. I want to hear from you.